Alright, Andre, John, the internet is furious. More specifically, the Pokemon fandom after the recent Treehouse where the Pokemon developers talked about the changes coming to Sword and Shield and its connectivity with Pokemon Home. Basically how every Pokemon that's brought to Pokemon Home won't necessarily be available in Sword and Shield. So if you brought a Pokemon with you for a long time, ever since Black and White 2, for example, using the Pokemon Transporter, that Pokemon might not necessarily be available in Sword and Shield, and therefore you can't use it in the game. And this has made a lot of people upset to an immense degree.
Right, and here's a metric for how pissed people are. So the Sword and Shield Treehouse footage has 1.1 million views, 18,000 likes, and 58,000 dislikes.
Jesus.
You can barely see the like bit on the little ratio there. So yeah, they're not happy.
And I know, like, every tweet from the Pokemon Company just gets instantly inundated with people asking for the National Dex to come back. It's a National Dex, right?
Right.
By the way, I'm totally not a Pokemon fan, or I don't really play the game, so this is a true outsider's perspective I'll be offering on this one.
Yeah, that's why we brought you in, because from somebody that does play the games, I never really used the Pokemon Bank because it's never been a big deal to me to bring the Pokemon I used in the previous generation to the next generation or to a future game. It's pretty great if you want to complete the Pokedex and you have a living dex, as it's referred to, where you can just transfer over all your Pokemon and boom, you don't have to worry about collecting all of them or finding where they're at or anything like that. But the journey for me with Pokemon is finding the new ones, creating a new team, and going from there. It's literally a new generation for me. And I have a hard time seeing it from the perspective of somebody who has been carrying a Pokemon forward. I definitely empathize with them, though, and understand that this sucks. It really does.
Yeah, right, because every Pokemon out of the 800 plus that exist at the moment is someone's favourite. Someone loves Trubbish, someone loves Mr. Mime, and
you take that
heartbreaking. Someone does, Andre, someone out there does. And it would be heartbreaking for them if they've been raising them since Ruby and Sapphire, to now just be told you can't bring them into Sword and Shield. So they brought them into every other game, but this one's the exception. And I understand that they would be upset about that, because they would have a relationship with this Pokemon. They've raised them to level 100, they have the moves they like. And yeah, to lose that relationship and just not know when they can come back would be something that would impact someone.
Yeah, this is a complicated issue, because as one who doesn't keep up with the Pokemon games these days, I'm pretty divorced from the scene, but I did love the original generation, and part of the appeal for me is, as you guys were kind of touching on, is building up your party of Pokemon from scratch. So the idea of like carrying them generation to generation doesn't really interest me too much, but again, we're obviously not the demographic that's upset, and there's obviously a demographic for that, considering Pokemon Bank and now Pokemon Home is a thing. And that's where it gets complicated, because if those were free services, I would like to think we'd see less backlash over this. But the fact that they're paid services is what really muddles the whole issue. On the one hand, from Game Freak's perspective, and maybe Pokemon companies as a whole, there are very real limitations in place. They don't have unlimited time or infinite manpower. There's only so many Pokemon they can logistically produce to put into this game. That's a fact, without delaying the game or making other compromises such as they have with not every Pokemon being there. On the other hand, people have been paying for a service in which that was a promise, as far as I know, in which you can back up these Pokemon, you can transfer them to a Pokemon Bank or coming up Pokemon Home, and use them in future generational titles. And that's where the ball or Pokeball has been dropped in this case, in that you can't with all your Pokemon, which again is due to some very real limitations. Pokemon Company isn't doing this to screw with people, they're doing it because, as far as we know, they can't. They can't provide every Pokemon at the time that they want to provide the game. So I think the key issue here is one of communication, that this wasn't made clearer sooner, perhaps, with the fact that people have been paying for Pokemon Bank now for years, and even if Sword and Shield is technically incompatible with Bank, it's compatible with basically a rebranded version of it in Pokemon Home. And if you can't bring every Pokemon over, like if it's one, especially if it's your favorite, what have you been paying for this time?
Well, the thing is that you still have that Pokemon. The Pokemon that you had all the way back in Ruby and Sapphire can still be brought forward to Pokemon Home and be used eventually. Presumably, if the Pokemon...
Presumably eventually.
Exactly, presumably eventually. We don't know if that Pokemon will be available later. Knowing Pokemon Company, it's all but a guarantee. Yeah, they might not be available in Sword and Shield, but they might be available in the third version of the game, or even a Sinnoh remake, as people have been asking for. That said, it sucks that it's not available now. That's what people want. They have this brand new generation. People like using certain Pokemon. They might be into the competitive scene and they have this competitive team set up. And if the Pokemon they issues are not available, well, that just sort of ruins that whole aspect of the way they play the game. And it, again, is understandable. But the other aspect of this is, Andre was talking about the potential of a delay, or, how something has to give. And the thing is, a delay is never an option for the Pokemon Company, specifically Game Freak, because of the media empire surrounding Pokemon. The Pokemon anime is a massive aspect of this. They're preparing to wind down Sun and Moon and begin the Sword and Shield anime. That is definitely in the cards. And speaking of cards, we also have the trading cards getting ready. Like, everything
Nice.
is getting ready for this next generation. They cannot delay it. And a lot of people are bringing up the idea of a patch, which they've not really talked about yet. And I know, Andre, one of the big things you're talking about is communication. I think they need to communicate about a potential patch or some sort of plan very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. It's a little bit similar to the Mario Maker situation, where it turned out there was no way to play with friends, and then sure enough, a couple weeks later, Nintendo announced during E3 actually that they're looking into addressing that, so that's good. And I think that's what Pokemon Company needs to do here. Not necessarily a patch, although that would be obviously the optimal solution, but moving forward is, I think what we need is a true roadmap for the series. I don't know how feasible that is, but if you're asking people to pay for a service in which you can put your Pokemon into, the cloud and reuse them in future games down the line, I think it's something you're going to have to start shining more light on. Is this going to be the case going forward, or is this going to be something that'll be addressed going forward, if not in Sword and Shield specifically? I think this is something that they need to start communicating to their audience, paying for the service. And I think it should be noted that, by the way, this Pokemon Bank, and have they announced a price point for Pokemon Home, by the way?
They have
Not yet, no.
Okay, so I don't know how applicable this would be. Pokemon Bank is actually pretty cheap. It's like $5 a month.
$5
so
a year.
at most, or $5 a year. I'm sorry, yeah, $5 a year. Yeah. So you've been paying $25 at most in total for the service all this time. Now, granted, that amount represents, means something different to everyone, but it's not a ton of money we're dealing with here. But the fact remains that people have been paying for a service with expectations, and I think this is something Pokemon Company could probably address earlier on. Even if it technically isn't Pokemon Bank, it kind of is an all but name coming up in Pokemon Home. So I think the way to address this now is either, as you said, Derek, a patch, or B, get that roadmap out there, tell us what the expectations are moving forward, because it's not... I don't think a lot of people like to gamble with their money, especially when they're not making anything, when there's no chance of making money back. They're investing purely in the ability to use their Pokemon in future games, and they can't do that with all of them in Sword and Shield. So I think this is time for Pokemon Company to tell us what to expect moving forward.
Because right now we're kind of running off assumption. We're assuming that these Pokemon will be available in the future, but there's no guarantee of that right now.
Yeah.
We don't know if Trubbish is going to be in the next game. We don't know if Trubbish is going to be patched into Sword and Shield. I don't even know if Trubbish is in Sword and Shield, because we don't know any of this. There's 800 Pokemon at the moment, a few more than that, and we don't know how many are being added in Sword and Shield. It could be up to the thousands at the moment. And that is a large number, and it's hard to put that many Pokemon into one game. And of course the models are already there, but there's more work that goes into that than just models. And whether they're ever going to have a complete, fully functional Pokedex is in question. I think they will, but that is assumption. We don't know that.
Yeah. Speaking of the models and the work going into those models, a lot of people are like scoffing at the idea that these animations are what's preventing the entire Pokedex being in. I don't think they're necessarily referring to the Pokemon animations. As we saw during the demo and the latest trailers, there's a lot of facial animations going into the characters. And yeah, it's facial animations. It's not that big of a deal. But Pokemon's never been exactly a graphical powerhouse when it comes to a lot of things. This is the most advanced we've ever gotten it. And it's still notable to have those extra motions in there, which I'm sure takes time and effort that might have been pulled away from putting all the Pokemon in. But it's still something like, would you rather have all the Pokemon, or would you rather have a completely blank-faced protagonist? Personally, for me, I'll take my limited Pokemon selection and have a world that just is much more vibrant. And I know that most people are like, well, why not both? Well, as I explained earlier, it's the problem of the limited time that the Game Freak has. So I do have faith that these issues will be addressed as time goes on, and hopefully with Pokemon Home being on mobile devices, that'll prevent it from having the same issues that we see now.
And as you were saying earlier, you can't delay Pokemon because it's a multimedia empire. So it's not like Animal Crossing, which was delayed to give employees better quality of life. And the thing is the alternative then is to encourage crunch, which is something you just shouldn't do. I guess the best case scenario is just have post-release updates for Sword and Shield. but they aren't communicating that. All we know is that Home won't be fully compatible with this game. So right now, this is the time they should be communicating what exactly is going to be happening in the future, like giving a roadmap of what's going to come, because we have no idea.
No, yeah, we don't. That is something that I'm actually surprised they didn't have ready. They should probably had some kind of response ready to go for this, better than what they have had so far. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, it's a tough spot to be in. It's really a problem intrinsic to Pokemon itself. This is an ever-increasing cast that they have to keep updating pretty much every generation, and that number is going to get ridiculously, I mean, it's already ridiculously large. It's going to only get bigger and bigger, and probably only become even more of an issue moving forward. So this is why they really do need to address this, now. Tell us, what do you expect for the future? Like, is this going to be the case for every Pokemon game, or every new generation at least, where only some Pokemon are compatible and you're never going to quite know what's up with them? I don't know. It's kind of a weird spot to be. I am not envious of the Pokemon Company right now, or Game Freak specifically, of the spot they've been put in over this. But at the same time, like, we've been talking a lot about the realities of development and how it's an empire and all this stuff is coordinated. That is all true. On the other hand, as consumers, that's also not really our concern. It's just making sure that we get that we get what we're paying for, and that's where again communication comes into play, to communicate those aspects better to their fan base.
True, but as consumers, we also have the ability to at least respect what goes into this. We don't know all the aspects they're working with, and a lot of people do that, and a lot of people are upset, but they get it, or something like that. But of course, there's always the loud minority that pops up with harassment and planning to we need to break down the walls, and how dare they do this, but
storm the city.
Exactly. It's
Right.
just, you can't do that. It does not work. All it does is put more stress into their lives, and I don't know about you guys, but when people are harassing me, I don't really feel the need to listen to what the harassers say and actually do what they want. If you present your ideas as reasonable and hey, it sucks, this is what we want, we'd really like this, I feel like they'd be okay, let's try to work towards that.
At the end of the day, it's still a video game. And that's something that's, I think, easily forgotten. Not that it excuses poor behavior, but ultimately, games are about having fun, and it seems like that kind of gets lost sometimes in some of the conversation. And yeah, no developer should be harassed over this, or companies in general even. Again, it's completely fine to express your displeasure, just do it in productive ways and not being a complete dick online. In this case, it's complicated by the fact that people are paying for a service in which it may seem they're not getting the full value of that they thought they were. So this is where I think, again, the roadmap we touched on earlier would be important for Pokemon Company or Game Freak to announce and show what what we can expect moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's probably going to be high on their priority as we
I hope
move
it is.
forward with.
For everyone's sake.
Yeah. So, any other thoughts on this whole situation, guys?
Just I have faith that it will improve in the future, but again, that faith is just my own. They need to say this themselves.
Yeah.
Alright guys, I think that about wraps it up for this discussion on Pokemon Sword and Shield. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and of course be sure to subscribe to Game Explained for more on Pokemon and other things gaming as well. Until next time, bye.